Best team won. They deserve it. We have done a good the group stage in Champions League seasons, arriving finals and winning and losing, but semi-finals, quarterfinals, we behave really well. But this season, in all competition, we have not been good. Nothing is eternal. We have been unbelievable, and I have the feeling that the previous seasons, the fourth time, we were better than them in the previous three, but this time they have been better and learn. This is the benchmark in this competition, that team.
OK, for more on last night's result, we can head over now to our reporter, Ben Ransom, who is in Madrid. Hello, Ben. It's one thing, isn't it, losing to Real Madrid? They're so good in the Champions League. But how sobering was the manner of that defeat for Manchester City?
Yeah, extremely. I think Pep Guardiola would have come here fearing the worst, but hoping for the best. Before the game, he said they would need an almost perfect game if they were to overturn that deficit. I think he felt the damage that was done right at the end of that first leg, that game at the Etihad, when they ended up surrendering their lead to lose 3-2, made this incredibly difficult. But I think he was hoping they might be able to rally and take some sort of heart and inspiration from some of the performances that this group of players have put in here in Madrid in recent seasons, getting goals, getting creditable draws, even winning on one occasion. But it wasn't to be. It was an absolutely nightmare start. I know we've just seen Kylian Mbappe's opening goal, John Stones limping off. That was all within 6 minutes. And the almost perfect game plan was out the window by that point. You can imagine what the atmosphere was like in the stadium. The Real Madrid fans are expectant, and this team was almost baying for blood. And then you started to feel sympathy and feel sorry for this Man City team, because they seemed to be up against the side that were their superior in every department. And when you put that into context from where City have been, and I think Pep's right to reference this, because they have been the better team than Real Madrid in the last 3 seasons when they've met, even though they've only managed to make it past them twice in those 3 seasons. But this game was different, wasn't it? This game was one where Real Madrid dominated. I likened it to that game, if you think back a couple of years ago, when City were en route to the treble, when they had the second leg of the Etihad and they absolutely wiped the floor with Real Madrid 4-0. This was a similar performance in terms of domination from Real Madrid. They are the benchmark. They're very much in contention to win this competition. But for City, it's about looking at themselves now. They've got to try and get into this competition next year. That's the main focus. Financially, it's essential. We've seen them in this midst of a rebuild. They spent big in the January window to try and just save this season. But look at the sorts of players that on the pitch last night looked shadows of their former selves. The likes of Ilkay Gundogan just could not get on the ball at all. He's out of contract in the summer. John Stones limping off again, another injury setback for him. He's out of contract not this summer, but the following summer. Bernardo Silva the same. These are players that have done so much, won so much in high-pressure matches, and yet, as a group, they're just not functioning. Pep hasn't been able to find the solutions to what's been Rodri missing, to the defensive frailty that had all year. But he has to now. The signings have to bed in quickly. They have to get back to at least winning matches domestically, because they need to finish in the top 4 or 5 to win the Champions League for next year. And then it's about the FA Cup. Can they salvage something from what has been, by Pep's own admission, a really, really tough season, by maybe winning some silverware right at the end and giving them something to look forward to? The rebuilds will come in the summer. Pep did say that last night. That's when the club will really assess everything in terms of playing personnel, who to move on, and how much they need to spend to strengthen. But right now, in the immediate future, it's about getting wins, getting results. But it doesn't come much tougher than Liverpool at the weekend, does it?
No, what a game that is for them. Thanks very much, Ben. Right, let's get some more reaction to that, because I'm delighted to say we're now joined by the former Manchester City goalkeeper, David James, or should I say former England, Liverpool, Aston Villa, countless other teams player. How are you, David? All well in David James' world?
Good morning, Matt. I'm very well, thank you. In my football world, last night wasn't particularly good because four of my teams didn't win. So, all good. Glad to be on the show. Doing very well.
Great to have you on the show. We'll get on to your other 2 teams, maybe slightly more positive when we get onto them, but we'll start with the really painful stuff. What did you make of yesterday and the way that City were dominated really by Real?
I thought it was a fascinating game, and I was covering it myself. And if you think about the first 4 minutes, it looked like City were going to have a go and get themselves into the game, get themselves back into the tie. And there was slight irony, wasn't there, that the opening goal for Real Madrid was very similar to the opening goal for Manchester City on the weekend against Newcastle. It was a simple ball over the top. Kylian Mbappe's finish, I have to say, was superb under a bit of pressure from John Stones. But everything that Ben was saying now, I think what happened last night for City was that the loss of Erling Haaland, and because he trained the day before, I think the planning would have been Erling Haaland would have started in the middle there, obviously, made things very different. And the front three didn't have the kind of threat or offer the kind of threat that perhaps, definitely would have offered if Erling Haaland had been there. Yeah, so 4 minutes, it looked all right. Then it was a Kylian Mbappe show. I think he had 6 shots yesterday, 3 goals. I mean, he was absolutely superb.
When you look around City's squad, does it feel as though a big rebuild is still needed despite those January signings? John Stones is 31, went off obviously yesterday. Ilkay Gundogan, 34. Kevin De Bruyne didn't even get on.
I think there was always going to be a rebuild, possibly this season. So when I say rebuild, I mean, I think, any 1 or 2 players could have got replaced. That would have been quite normal. I think without sort of playing too much on it, the injuries have been a big issue. I'm not concerned about Rodri on his own. I think City, and even if you look at the results, could suffer Rodri not playing. But throughout this season, then you've added to that. The key issues for me have been the wingers, losing Doku, losing Jack Grealish at key points in the season, creating an environment which has looked and is looking, especially yesterday, a little bit fragile. The rebuild will look more sort of obvious now, as I say, when you bring up the ages there, simply because there are so many problems going on. They beat, was it Salford 8-0, beat Ipswich 6-0, and everyone thinks the corner's been turned. Then all of a sudden it's a defeat against Real Madrid, defeat here, defeat there. So, there will be a rebuild, but some of the new signings they've got, I think, are going to be special. Marmoush in particular, I think, is going to be special for City, not just because of his hat-trick on the weekend, but this guy knows how to score goals, and I think that will get City through with regards to qualifying for the Champions League, at least this season.
It's very hard, obviously, to maintain the standards that Manchester City had set. It's pretty much impossible because they were right at the top of the tree. But have you been surprised at how quickly they've dropped off, at the level of drop-off?
Well, yes. Yeah, I have been surprised. As I say, I thought that it was, Rodri being injured wasn't a problem. Then you start adding Kevin De Bruyne, and then you start adding defenders, then you start adding wingers. And I think at one point there was 5 on the bench and 2 of them were goalkeepers for something like ridiculous numbers for a couple of games that Pep had. He was really down to bare bones. And again, as an ex-player, I think it's fascinating when you look at the psychology, because even in passing, and I've watched so many games this season, you look at a City side who, like Madrid yesterday, freedom in passing. They don't even think about where the next pass is going, and it kind of works. There's been stages this season where you can literally see the City players thinking about what they've got to do, because that confidence has sort of avoided them, if you like. Once you start having the results one on top of the other, all of a sudden it becomes multiple problems, and confidence being the key one in all this, because if you haven't got confidence, you can't be the best players. So, yes, I am surprised. Would I be surprised if they don't qualify for the Champions League? I think that would be the biggest surprise of all. Getting beat yesterday by Real Madrid, whether it was 3-1 or 1-0 or even drawing and getting knocked out, wouldn't have been a surprise to me.
We'll get onto that. I just want to ask you about Edison, obviously, as we've got you. It's not just the Rodri problem, is it, Manchester City? And while Edison wasn't really, you would say, grossly at fault for any of the goals last night, is he not quite as reliable as he once was?
I think Eddie's an interesting... I love Eddie, and we saw the best of him, didn't we, on the weekend against Newcastle, I think, what he offers to Manchester City. But there's been an ongoing thing with Eddie since the beginning of the season, if not pre-season, talk of moves and stuff like that. And slightly unsettling, perhaps, but Eddie, similar to, I think, the whole Manchester City side, when you talk about the success they had a couple of years ago, the success that they've continued to have in the Premier League as champions, there's going to be a down spot. And every player, every team's allowed these down spots. And unfortunately for Manchester City, it would seem that a lot of the players are having it at the same time, whether it's through injury or not the best form. But Eddie wasn't at fault at all yesterday. I think even with the first goal, the positioning of the defence was bad, considering there was no pressure on the ball. He had to hope that Diaz was going to get a touch on it, in which case he was in the right position. Unfortunately, Diaz didn't. And then you look at the quality of Mbappe's finish. Beyond that, the other 2 goals from Mbappe were absolutely superb. So no question on Eddie's performance yesterday, and he's going to have to be right in his head and right in his physical state for the game against Liverpool on Sunday.
And looking ahead at the rest of the season, Pep Guardiola doesn't really do trophyless seasons, does he? But it's looking like the FA Cup is the only option for him now. But what's more important at this stage, finishing in the Champions League places or getting your hands on some silverware?
Champions League places. I mean, I think the current state, because it's been going on for it seems like months now, the City haven't been able to string together some really good form. To depend on a trophy in the FA Cup, I mean, you've basically got to be playing great for every game, haven't you? So at the moment, that would be a question. I think they're more than capable of finishing in the Champions League, as I say. Yes, it's tight round there, but if it drops down to 5 places, it gives them a little bit of wiggle room. But as I say, with the signings of Mamouche, Nico coming into their side and being able to perform as they have done in the Premier League, then I think City will be okay.
It seems really strange to ask this question, but at what point does the focus turn on to Pep Guardiola? Let's just say that Manchester City were to finish outside of the Champions League places, and it might even be the top 5 as well, not the top 4, and also not win the FA Cup. Would he come under serious fire then?
As a manager, he'd have to, yes. I think it's frustrating in a little way. At the beginning of the bad run, I don't think anyone could pinpoint what the problem was. And when the run continues, then arguably everybody's point becomes right, because there's proof of it in lack of results, lack of performance. I think, and I was thinking about this yesterday, the one thing that Pep hasn't experienced is losing on a sort of global scale. As a manager, I think this will give him a lot of experience, not one that he necessarily wanted or expected this season, but going forward, given that he signed that new contract, that this will help him going forward. I don't think there's a question on what his capabilities are, but without the players to be able to maximise that thought process and that playing style, then he has been hamstrung quite literally. So, the focus will be on him, but I don't think it's a point of looking for a new manager for Manchester City anytime soon.
Yeah, I suspect not either. How about Real Madrid? Then they haven't had the best of tournaments so far. The fact that they had to go into the playoffs, but the way that they dealt with Man City, do you think they should be the favourites from here on in?
I love this new format, I have to say. There's question marks about it in the beginning, and the fact that we have two former champions, recent champions, in a playoff to get eliminated before the knockouts. But effectively, this is just another knockout game for Real Madrid. They've got a few more to contend with if they want to go and win the Champions League again. And the one thing about Real Madrid is they love this kind of environment. They did enough to get to the position to play City, had the confidence that they could beat City. And again, after 4 minutes, the tie was pretty much done, wasn't it? Are they favourites? There's something about them, and I don't think you can look at the numbers or pinpoint the particular sort of style of play that gets them the success they've had. But over multiple seasons now, knockout tournaments, even when they look dead and buried, second leg, last minutes, whatever. Yeah, I don't think anyone really wants to play them unless they're playing him in the final and hope that one or two of their players get sent off.